by improving the present moment and future through visualization, consciously creating and pulling a more benevolent, loving future towards yourself, then can you rewrite our past, basically changing the past by consciously creating and consciously rewriting our future. Does that make sense?
There are two ways to understand this. When we observe time from the ultimate truth, from the true nature of things as they truly are, the future has not yet arrived, and the present cannot be grasped at all, and the past has already ceased to exist. It is impossible to obtain it. As for the present moment, currently, if we observe it in this way, then perhaps it too cannot be obtained. That's why Buddhism has many different methods for contemplating the three times. Through such contemplation, we find that nothing can be obtained. It's not just time. It includes all of us present here today, and everything else as well. When we analyze emptiness, nothing truly exists. But in appearances in our real lives, we can't simply dismiss the future as illusory. It still involves our plans and our dreams, and all the plans we make for life still need to be planned. But as for the past, apart from recalling it through memory, there's no way to go back and revisit it.
Thank you.
Tashi Delak, there is a question. Where do people go after death? I want to be reborn in a place without sorrow or distress. I might end up in heaven if I genuinely pray to go to hell to save sentient beings. Then I might go to Amitabha Buddha's Pure Land, or perhaps to a place where there are very wise people who can teach me how to rescue these hungry ghosts.
Generally speaking, overall, if we practice virtuous deeds, whether it's heaven or the Pure Land of ultimate bliss, if you engage in virtuous actions, even if you don't want to go, you might still end up there naturally when the conditions are right. If you engage in unwholesome actions, even if you don't want to, you might still end up in hell. So our intentions sometimes do play a real role. And sometimes when the causes are present, the results will naturally manifest. Some time ago, I was in New Zealand, and I gave a lecture on the topic of what if God met the Buddha. In that lecture, I cited some scholars' viewpoints. They believe that the Pure Land in Buddhism is the same as the heaven in Christianity. I don't know myself, but I quoted this perspective. Actually, all of us should reflect on this together. When it comes to doing good and attaining happiness in the future, I think there's really no difference.
Here's the thing. I once read a book on psychological therapy. It said our current fears of water or the dark sometimes don't actually come from traumatic childhood memories, but from memories of our past lives. For example, in a previous life, we drowned to death, so in this life, we have a fear of water. What I want to ask is, how do you view this idea? Sometimes when we do hypnotherapy, it guides you to recall memories from your past lives, to heal our subconscious. We are born with certain instinctive fears. Could this perhaps be beneficial? Thank you.
Actually, many of our emotional experiences are also the result of various causes and conditions. Some may indeed be related to past lives, while others may not necessarily be. But there is actually some indication that certain fears are connected to past lives. Yesterday, a teacher here in Toronto shared a story about one of his students. It was probably before the age of 3. He had previously been a Tanzanian. At that time, he seemed to be a black person. During the course of World War II, his hand was broken. As a child, he could remember everything clearly, including his younger brother from his previous life and the bombings. All of these phenomena have been verified. They were entirely statements from his parents. These were real events. So many of the fears we have in this world today, some actually originate from the subconscious, or they may be related to things that happened to us in the past. But some may also be caused by other temporary or short-lived conditions in this present life, during this lifetime.
Very prominent psychiatrists have put people under hypnosis for purposes of trying to heal them, and in doing so, there have been cases where these people have actually spoken from different places, from different lives. The psychiatrist was able to actually ask them, what do you look like, where are you from, what century are you in? So I just want to know if you had any comments on this as a way to remember something about your past lives and in terms of how you feel about it for purposes of healing, and if you feel that this is all real.
There are two situations with this kind of therapy. One situation is indeed genuine, because when the human mind traces back, in fact, to a certain extent, through a kind of inner peace and contemplation, it is possible to recall some processes from past lives. In Buddhism, there is a meditative method of tracing back through contemplation, which is actually quite similar to this, in fact. But there may also be various other situations, for example, that could occur. So we need to approach this thoughtfully with a balanced perspective.
There is a question I have been reflecting on for a long time. When we speak of all sentient beings across all directions and all times, I keep wondering what infinite life truly means. I feel like there's a hurdle in my way, an obstacle that I just can't get over. There's a certain point. Where is the starting point of sentient beings? If life is truly infinite, then in the entire world as we know it, how many of these kinds of conscious entities or sentient beings are there in total altogether? Is the total number infinite? How many are there really? Is it possible for new conscious entities to appear? That is, to actually add a completely new one on top of infinity. Where did the very first starting point originally come from? In this infinity of conscious entities, is it possible for one to disappear? Like, could one vanish within infinity? This is a question I've been unable to find an answer to for a long time. Thank you.
The unique Buddhist explanations won't be discussed here. Let's talk about the general commonly held view. There are countless, boundless, sentient beings in samsara. Every life has existed continuously since beginningless time. There are truly no newly born ones. Within samsara, there are innumerable, limitless, sentient beings, if, in the future, they do not attain true liberation. Then ultimately, it is also truly endless. If, among them, some sentient beings attain liberation, from that point on, their time of wandering in samsara has finally ended. Are you really trying to count all sentient beings? Even the universe is vast beyond measure, so how could we ever count the number of beings within it?
Khenpo Sodargye. This time I came up here to represent the Tibetan people in thanking you for your visit. The first question, Master, we'd like to know your turning point. What made you devote yourself to Buddhism? What was the biggest turning point? The second question is, you have debated in Buddhist philosophy and said you've solved many problems. Which was the biggest problem you solved? Thank you.
Are you Tibetan?
Yes.
Okay, first of all, I especially want to thank you all for your understanding. Originally, there were plans in my schedule to gather together with everyone, as some people had suggested. But due to scheduling constraints, including some dialogues with other scholars this time, which were planned last year. Regarding your question about my entry into Buddhism, you should know that in our Tibetan region, when you first come into this world, basically it was a Buddhist family and a Buddhist environment. So, to be honest, I really didn't have any other choice, you know. I was raised in this way of life. Later, even though I went to school and had some other different experiences in life, my faith and my views have always remained steadfast. So I personally believe that for the rest of my life, this perspective of mine will not be lost. Because I have gone through countless hardships and used certain theoretical observations to establish this viewpoint myself. So I personally and truly believe that this particular viewpoint is, without a doubt, the most reliable and the most deserving of my life.
Respectfully, Khenpo, I'd like to ask, how do we define sentient and non-sentient life? Our world is full of tiny life forms, like bacteria, viruses, and other microorganisms. I just want to know, could you please explain how exactly we determine whether they have souls or not? All right, thank you very much, Khenpo.
It's like this. Bacteria, including some of the microscopic life forms described in biology, from a broad perspective on life, some of them should be considered as such. But from the narrower definition of sentient beings, what we call sentient beings, according to Buddhist teachings, as the Buddha explained in various related scriptures, they possess the 5 aggregates: form, feeling, perception, mental formations, and consciousness. It is the combination of all 5 aggregates that can be called sentient beings or beings that possess sentience. If any group or category does not possess this combination of the 5 aggregates, even though it can in fact react and reproduce, and undergoes various forms of evolution, biochemical processes, and eventual demise, it is still, in biological terms, only called life because of its reactions. Therefore, what we refer to as sentient life, that is to say conscious beings and plant life, and labeled differently from the perspectives of both religion and biology.
Not just over trivial or insignificant matters, but I really tend to lose my temper quite easily. I've always tried to control myself, but I feel that, especially during my process of learning Buddhism, it's even harder to control. For example, when something happens, when I'm thinking about it or talking to my friends about it, I might end up saying a lot of unpleasant things. I've been wondering if this is my inner demon, or perhaps a demon that's hindering my spiritual practice. Because, when I'm actually talking about this, basically, I clearly know it's wrong and that I should control myself, but it's really hard. So I want to know, how can I suppress this rather ugly inner demon? Because having a bad temper is quite like setting fire to the forest of your merits. And it's not good for the people around you either. It's not beneficial for anyone. So I want to know how I can improve myself, because I don't really think this is related to my character or overall quality as a person. But honestly, I do think it has a lot to do with my temper. Thank you so much.
Actually, when we are born, some people may have a stronger tendency toward anger, while others are more prone to greed. But the fact that you've noticed this shortcoming in yourself is actually very good. You can gradually and steadily change it over time. As for how you might want to change, I would suggest that you might be a Buddhist. If you are a Buddhist, it's best to study the patience chapter of The Way of the Bodhisattva, because the patience chapter has over 100 verses. After actually studying it, many people I know, in fact, who used to have a bad temper became very calm later on. Some people even became very accomplished in their practice. So I think that perhaps through a certain kind of training, and also when necessary, prostrating or going for a run outside, there are ways to temper your body, and gradually your mind will become more calm and gentle, peaceful and relaxed. This is also a method. There should be a way. Just take it slow.
Thank you so very much for all of your questions, and especially please help me thank Khenpo for his wonderful teachings here tonight.